Well, Dr. Paul, I understand our next guest is also someone you've served with and quite familiar with.
Kelly Seitz is another amazing lady. We've served together in Haiti during the earthquake, and also we were overlapped some at the field hospital in Iraq during the conflict there in Mosul. And you know, I really have tremendous respect for Kelly. Not only has she served all over the world, but she served 2 deployments, I think it was, to the Ebola, during the Ebola outbreak in Liberia. So she's just a one-of-a-kind person, a great heart, great nurse, and so glad she is going to speak to us tonight.
Well, let's take a listen to what Kelly has to say here at the M3 Conference 2021.
In 2009, I prayed a prayer that dramatically changed the course and the passions of my life. I had been living in Michigan, living my own personal dream as a wife and a mom, an intensive care nurse working at the local hospital, plugged into my church, working at the crisis pregnancy center in town. And all those things were good and they were right, and I was happy. But I was getting complacent. I was settled, comfortable. I didn't really have a vision for what God was doing globally. Life was safe. When you live safe, you don't really have an urgency and a dependency to see God in a bigger way and to cling to Him. It's so easy to make your comfort an idol. So on January 1st, 2009, I set out a new prayer to pray, God, break my heart for what breaks your heart. Many before me have prayed that prayer, and probably many after. I prayed with open hands for once in my life and said, God, I'm willing to go wherever you send me, to use me how you want to use me. Help me to see you, God, in bigger ways. And for once in my life, I had no agenda when I prayed that prayer. I wasn't telling God exactly what I wanted and telling Him exactly where I wanted Him to send me. I was praying with open hands because I didn't know. God, use me any way, anywhere, in the way that you choose to use me. Now, when I prayed that prayer, God, break my heart for what breaks yours. What I really meant, and I wouldn't have said it to you, I wouldn't have thought it, but what I really meant was send me someplace just for a minute. Let me see it for a minute, break my heart, and then send me back to my comfortable life. I didn't really say that, but that's kind of what I meant. But I prayed with sincerity and simplicity and honesty. For a whole year, I prayed that, not knowing when God would answer and how He would answer. Every day, God, break my heart for what breaks your heart, not fully knowing the ramifications of what that was really asking for. How God's heart breaks so deeply every single day. So I opened my hands and I offered my skills and my life to use any way He wanted. So often we clench our fists. We hold the things close. We want to serve God, but we want to control the details. We grip tight to our lives, grip tight to our dreams and our careers, our skills and our hopes, our families and our friends, our burdens, our plans. Even the way we want to serve Him, we hold that close to us. Think how much energy it takes to clench your fists all the time, gripping onto the things that you really should open up and release to Him. You can release them and offer them back to Him and focus that energy on the actual serving. And when we open our hands to Him, It liberates us and gives us freedom to trust him. How sweet it must be for God when voluntarily we open our hands and offer it back to him. He could, and he often does, pry our hands open off of the things that we hold, like a parent ripping the hands off of a toy from a child, one finger at a time. And God will do that to us. But if we open our hands willingly to him, how sweet that must be for him. You can't fully understand God or what matters to him from a distance, from far away. But it's when you get right up in the trenches along with him, you see him in a bigger way. He becomes more clear. We can read his word and we can get an idea of the things he's doing and the things that matter to him. But when you get down in the trenches with God and you can trust him and you depend on him, that's when you see him in a bigger way. And when we open our hands to him, we also tell him, Lord, I'm trusting you with the consequences of obeying you, of saying, yes, Lord, I'll follow you, and I trust you with whatever happens. Sometimes we need to pray for the faith just to be able to open our hands and offer it back to him. We feel we can control it if we hold it tight. Well, for that whole year, I never imagined in my wildest dreams how God was going to answer that prayer. For a whole year I prayed, and in January of 2010, I got my answer. I was watching TV, and it was the Haiti earthquake. 230,000 people died in the Haiti earthquake. I knew then God spoke to my heart, and he said, now. And I knew I needed to get involved with the people who were working to fix the problems, who were being part of the solution. There's a lot of organizations in the business of mending broken hearts, but Samaritan's Purse was the one I chose to be with. They are in the business of mending and healing broken hearts with Jesus' love. They're committed to working with the poor and the oppressed and the marginalized. So a few months later, I head off to Haiti for my answered prayer, and I offered God, here we go, God, let's go. And right on that first trip, the very first beginning part, he taught me in this most simple way how he would provide moving forward for the next 8 years up until now. It's such a simple story, but that's how God works. We were out doing mobile medical clinics after the Haiti earthquake. Far, far out into the nowhere lands of Haiti, people had been pouring out of Port-au-Prince after the earthquakes, living in unbelievable situations. So we were running mobile medical. And we had split up our team, and I was working myself as a nurse and another nurse and a Haitian doctor. There were hundreds of people really sick, needing mobile medical care. They would line up and get the triage nurse and then see the Haitian doctor, and then they'd come to me. I was working in the pharmacy kind of treatment part of the tent, giving them shots and IVs and medications. And a disaster response nurse's best friend is a Sharpie marker. We use it for everything. I was using it to write on IV bags, to write on their wounds, to write on the little plastic medical bags so that I could send home their medications. Most importantly, I was using it to draw on the syringes as I would drop the medications and show the moms how much medicine to give their children. It was 115 degrees in Haiti, and my Sharpie markers dried up. I no longer had one, so I was frustrated. I tried everything. I tried to use a pen. I tried to use paper. I tried to use tape. Nothing was working. I was backing up the whole thing, and we had hundreds of patients to see. I tried everything. I felt myself gripping my hands around the problem, and I'm going to be honest, the last thing on my mind was to say a prayer, because really, the God of the universe is a little busy, and does he care about a Sharpie marker? I felt silly. So finally, after frustration, I threw up a flare prayer, and I said, Lord God, I just need a Sharpie marker. I was out in the middle of nowhere, and I almost laughed when I said it. Now, I knew he could bring me a Sharpie marker, but I didn't know how. So I had this much faith, and I went on about my business. Less than 5 minutes later, a car pulls up out in the middle of nowhere. It just happened to be a Samaritan's Purse donor who flew in from Canada, had given to the project, and he flew in to check it out and get toured around. He came up and goes, wow, look at everything that's happening here. This is so great. Look at all these people. I explained and we talked. And right before he left, he says, well, do you need anything? And I go, yeah, I need a Sharpie mark. And he goes, oh, here you go. 5 minutes. God taught me something so big in that moment. Moving forward, I've thrown up so many Sharpie-sized prayers since then. God cares about the small things if you open your hands to him. He cares about the mountain-moving prayers, but he cares about the Sharpie-moving prayers too. If he cares about a Sharpie, how much more will he provide when we really call on him? So I came home from Haiti, and I opened my hands again, and I said, what next, Lord? And soon after that, he sent me back with Samaritan's Purse to work with cholera patients. 7,000 patients died of cholera. Samaritan's Purse had a cholera treatment center. And again, every day our team opened our hands to him as we served him, trusted him when patients would collapse on the road trying to get to us, and they'd get delivered to us in wheelbarrows off the road. It's amazing to see people clinging to life. You squeeze in a few bags of IV solution and they come back to life again. Disaster response gives us such an opportunity to meet people in the trenches on their worst day and to share Christ with them. What next, Lord, after cholera? And God sent us to the Philippines after the Category 5 super typhoon. What next, Lord, after that? God sent us to Liberia and sent me to Liberia to work in an Ebola unit. 2 times I went to Liberia. In the first trip, I was there for a month. Every single patient we had, except for 2, died. Every single patient, day after day after day. And we trusted him and opened our hands to him and said, God, you are sovereign. We trusted you. We know you're good, Lord, even when we don't understand. If you open your hands to God in your service, he will work in us to do the work that he's called us to do. And because we know that every man is loved, every man, no matter who they are, they're made in the image of God. Myself and our team members trusted God and went to Iraq and worked in a field hospital not far from the fighting in Mosul, where we cared for ISIS soldiers, fighters who were determined to kill, but they were made in the image of God. So we showed them the same love and compassion that we showed our other patients. In one bed was an ISIS soldier. We cared for him and then walked across to the bed across from him and cared for the very child he tried to kill. We trusted him. We trusted God with open hands every day as we saw the fallout from what their God says. ISIS, their God who they follow, their God says, kill the enemy, hate the enemy, blow them up, maim them, kill them, cut them down, and while you're at it, blow yourself up. That's what their God says. But our God, the one true God, tells us, I tell you to love your enemy. Our God says, pray for your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Our God says, if your enemy is hungry, give him something to eat. If your enemy is thirsty, give him a drink. And our God says, vengeance is mine. And our God says, one day, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. Myself and our team, and Dr. Paul, those who are in Iraq, and those who have served in disaster response, we trust him with the consequences of seeing the suffering and the death over and over and over and over. We trust him with the obedience. It's not enough just to answer the call of God. It's not enough to say, yes, Lord, I'll go. You have to open your hands to him every single day and be willing to change directions, do things differently, do the hard things, go to scary places. One of the most surreal moments of my life was in that field hospital. Every morning, we have devotions on no matter what deployment we're on, no matter what disaster, we know we need to cling to God to do the work. And every morning in Iraq, we had devotions. This particular morning, the bombs were really close, not close enough to hurt us, but they were close enough to really hear them loud, and they would shake our floor. And that morning we sang as the bombs went off around us, "It is well with my soul." And it was such a beautiful moment. I came home from Iraq, as I know many of my team members did, deeply scarred from the things that we saw there. So many children died and blown up, and so many injuries at the hands of another person. I came home and clenched my fists. Samaritan's Purse called a few months later and said, "Can you go to Bangladesh and work in a diphtheria treatment center?" I closed my hands and I said, "No, God, please don't send me there. I'm going to see more kids die." And I felt God, one by one, releasing my fingers. And he said, "You can do it. I'm going to be with you like I always have been for 8 years." God continues to allow me to do this beautiful work of disaster response nursing, to be in the trenches. He helps bandage up our hearts. I trust him with the consequences. Corrie ten Boom says, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." So as we began this great conference, some of you came, you already are serving Jesus in great places, here or abroad. I'm asking you, when was the last time you just opened up your hands and said, "I give it all back to you, Lord, help me in the day-to-day"? You've said yes to your calling already. Are you opening your hands and saying, "I'll do it your way, God. I'll trust you in those things that seem impossible"? Some are here contemplating, hoping to hear from God, expecting to hear from God. Will you open your hands to him and say, "Lord, anywhere in any way"? You never know where God will send you and how he will use a willing person. I'll finish with Jim Elliot. I love him. He was a man who opened his hands to God every day. I look up to him. He says, "Missionaries are very human folks, just doing what they're asked. Simply a bunch of nobodies trying to exalt a somebody. That's all we're trying to do." And for me, I never imagined how a simple prayer, "God, break my heart for what breaks yours," where that would end up. We're just a bunch of nobodies trying to exalt a somebody. And if you listen and open your hands, he will speak to you and he will call you and he will equip you. Enjoy the conference.
Incredible insights from Kelly Seitz today for our M3 conference. Kelly, of course, is a registered nurse. Jennifer, I understand on our website we have incredible resources specifically for nurses.
We do. There are so many good resources. What we've done is we've compiled this handbook. It's a nursing resource handbook, and it lists all the mission hospitals and clinics that have opportunities for nurses. So it's very unique. Of course, Kelly serves with DART, which is SP, but there are so many opportunities all over the world to serve. And so this is specifically for nurses.
Well, you can find that and so many other incredible resources at our website. So while you're viewing, while you're watching, make sure click through those tabs, peruse all of the information and resources that we have. In fact, while you're there, look for that tab that says Q&A. That's an opportunity for you to ask a question of Kelly, who we're going to bring on in just a minute, or any of our speakers throughout this weekend. But we're excited to welcome Kelly with us live. Welcome. It's so good to have you here at M3 2021.
Kelly,
Hey.
so good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Kelly, I loved your talk. I've seen it 2 or 3 times now, but one of the things that just always stops me in my tracks is a statement you make that it's easy to make comfort an idol. You know, I found that in my own life. Can you comment just a little bit on that?
Yeah, we live in the comfort capital of the world. I mean, there's so much comfort around us at all times, and it's hard to leave that, especially in a disaster situation when you're going to not so comfortable.
Yeah.
But God meets you there in those places, and when you're out of your comfort zone, that's when you get to see a big God. We don't always see him when we have everything that we need at our fingertips.
Sometimes our flesh will resist that, though, won't it?
Yeah.
Hey, I
You
had
have to fight against it.
Yeah, I had an interesting perspective since we've served so many places together, and we've overlapped in different places. But one of the things, Kelly, that I think that's really important for people to realize, especially in disaster relief, we just don't need medical people, do we? Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, especially, I can speak for Samaritan's Purse, where we have all kinds of needs: water and sanitation, shelter, food distribution, engineers, logistics people, finance people, hospitality people. There's something for everyone in missions. Every one of us has a gift, and God will use it for his work.
Speaking of SP, Kelly, I just think it's the DART program there. I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more on that, but I think that's just a great way for people who may not be able to serve for 6 months or 20 years, but they may want to put their toe into serving in missions. It's a great way to get involved. If people wanted to get involved in the Samaritan's Purse DART program, how would they do that?
Normally we would have a booth out in the hallway area of your church, but for now they can go to our website, Samaritan.org, and read all about all the places that we're serving all throughout the world, and even domestically in the United States. And they can see specifically about the DART program on the website.
Yeah.
Well, and Jennifer, I want to come back to you because at our website, m3missions.com, there's actually virtual resources or virtual walkthrough or displays, if you will. Right?
There is. So normally, like Kelly said, we have the exhibitors here, which of course, hopefully one day we'll be back. And it's so good when you can actually go up and talk to people with the organization. But what we've done this year is put all the organizations on the website and made it easy for everybody. You can just click on the name, and it'll take you straight to their website.
Yep, and that's at our Mobilizing Medical Missions web address. In case you're wondering, you're probably already there, but M3, the number 3, m3missions.com. Kelly, we've had some questions come in from some of our viewers tonight, actually from all over the country. One of them is from Emily. She has a two-part question. I'll ask it in two. The first is, how did you feel, and did you feel safe when you were serving in Iraq?
Yes, I actually did feel safe. We had we take security very seriously at Samaritan's Purse, and I'm sure other organizations do as well. And we knew being on the front lines in the war was going to be exceptionally challenging, but I really did feel safe, and we need to be there. There was a lot to do. We saw a lot of patients, as Dr. Paul can testify. We were there together, and you just honed in and focused on what God's called you to do. And you, like I said a million times during my talk, you trust God with the consequences. So I really did feel safe. And I just trusted God that he called me to go, and I would trust him with that outcome.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic answer. And I think part two of her question is maybe one of the reasons why she's asking. What opportunities are you aware of that are in the Middle East?
Well, you could go to the website for Samaritan's Purse and find out of the things that we're doing in the Middle East. There's a lot of work going on there right now, actually. A lot of opportunities, and probably some in the packet that Jen just showed you, opportunities for nurses, and I know for physicians as well.
And I think this is probably a common question. This comes from us, from Cheryl, I believe. Yeah, how do you handle re-entry once you've been serving in missions?
That's really challenging, especially this last year. I've deployed 3 times during the pandemic. And usually before the pandemic, I leave the comfort of my home, go to a disaster, live there for 4 weeks or 5 weeks in a disaster, and then I come home to the comfort of my home. Well, over the last year, I left a disaster to go to a disaster and came home to a disaster. So that's been a challenging re-entry for me this year, for sure. But just pulling away, taking time for myself and my family to get to know my family since I've been gone. Spend a lot of time with God, processing, because you don't have time to process on the field. You need to process once you get home. So reading my Bible and resting and just getting ready for the next call.
Yeah, that's kind of a great segue actually into our last question for you, Kelly, and this comes from someone in Massachusetts. Says, where was your family located while you're being deployed? You're separated for the most part, correct?
Yeah. So I live in Michigan with my husband and our kids. So they're home in Michigan, holding down the fort while I'm away.
Yeah.
Kelly, I love what you said. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. I think that was one of the highlights of your talk. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your talk, and thanks for sharing this time with us this evening.
Thank you. Good to see you.